All right, let's dive right in today. We're taking a close look at the U.S. election in 2024, specifically the race between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump.
Big one, yeah.
And I think a lot of people might be thinking, okay, interesting, but why should I care if I'm not American? Especially, if you're more into global affairs or even things like, prepping for those English exams like the IELTS.
Right.
But this U.S. election, honestly, it's got these huge implications that go way beyond just the U.S. itself.
Oh, absolutely. It really does. And to really grasp what those are, we've got to get a handle on some of the key parts of how the U.S. election system works.
Okay, yeah.
And one of the most interesting is this whole concept of swing states.
Swing states.
Yeah, these are the unpredictable battlegrounds.
Yeah.
The ones that can really decide the entire election.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
You've got places like Pennsylvania, Florida, Arizona, states where the vote could go either way.
So it's not just a simple red state, blue state kind of thing then?
No, not at all. And that's where this thing called the Electoral College comes into play. Mm-hmm. It's this, I guess you could call it a unique system where every state gets a certain number of these electoral votes based on its population.
Okay.
And to actually win the presidency, you need at least 270 of these votes.
Huh, interesting.
And here's the kicker. It's not always about who gets the most votes overall.
Wait, really? So you're saying someone could become president even if they didn't actually win the most votes from the people?
Yeah, it's wild, right? And it's actually happened before. Remember back in 2016, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, but Donald Trump became president.
Oh, right.
He got enough of those electoral votes by winning in some really key states. And this time around, those key states, they're shaping up to be Pennsylvania, Florida, and Arizona again. Makes them the real focal points for both campaigns.
So it's like all eyes on those states?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, that's starting to make a bit more sense. But why are those specific states so hard to predict? What makes them swing back and forth?
Well, they're really diverse, both in terms of who lives there and the issues that matter to voters.
Okay, so what kind of diversity are we talking about?
Well, take Pennsylvania, for example. You've got big cities like Philadelphia, which tend to lean more liberal.
Yeah.
And then you've got the more rural areas that are, typically more conservative.
Yeah.
So it creates this real mix, this dynamic where candidates can't just rely on those traditional party strongholds.
Right.
They have to appeal to a wider range of voters.
So it's like a microcosm of the whole country in a way.
Exactly, yeah, with all its complexities and divisions.
And that's why they're so hard to call. These swing states.
Exactly.
Florida, too, right? I mean, they've got a big Latinx population, right?
They're huge. And their voting patterns, they can shift a lot depending on the candidates and where they stand on things like immigration or the economy.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now that you mention it, I remember something about the 2000 election. Wasn't Florida at the center of all that controversy?
Oh, absolutely. That was the Bush Gore election, right?
Yeah.
It all came down to Florida. And the margin was so ridiculously tight. I think it was like 537 votes.
Wow, that's crazy close.
Yeah, and it triggered all these recounts, legal challenges. It even went to the Supreme Court. They ended up deciding the winner.
537 votes. That's insane. Really shows how every vote counts.
Oh, absolutely. Especially in those swing states.
Yeah, but I gotta say, even with all this focus on what's happening in the U.S., I'm still kind of grappling with why someone outside the U.S. should really care.
I get it. It can seem like a very internal American thing.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. The U.S. president, they have this, immense impact on global affairs. Think about the issues you care about, climate change, immigration, the economy.
Right.
The U.S. plays a huge role in shaping all of that. The decisions that are made in the Oval Office, they have these ripple effects. Mm-hmm. They reach across borders and impact so many lives around the world.
So it's like a butterfly effect kind of thing. Like one election could set off a chain of events with these global consequences.
Exactly. And getting a handle on what those consequences could be, that's really key. Especially, if you're thinking about exams like the IELTS, which often touch on these global issues. Let's take climate change as an example, right?
Okay.
The U.S. is one of the biggest emitters of greenhouse gases.
Yeah.
And their policies, they have a massive impact on global efforts to try to combat climate change. So depending on who wins this election, we could see a pretty drastic shift in the U.S. approach to things like environmental regulations, international agreements, investments in renewable energy.
Right. Yeah.
It's a big deal.
It all ties together in a way you don't always think about.
That's for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of mind-blowing how these U.S. elections, something that seems so internal, can actually have such a big impact on the whole planet.
Yeah, it really is.
We were just talking about climate change, and it's hard to think of an issue that has higher global stakes.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it goes beyond just the environment, too. Immigration, that's another area where U.S. policy can have those ripple effects all over the world. I mean, think about it, right?
Yeah.
The U.S. is a huge destination for immigrants.
Right.
So their policies, on things like border security, visas, even pathways to citizenship, that can all influence migration patterns worldwide.
So basically, if the U.S. changes its immigration policy, it could have this domino effect on other countries.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that impact could be on, well, everything, really.
Yeah.
Border tensions, economic opportunities.
Wow, yeah.
It's all connected.
Makes you think, for sure. And we can't forget about the global economy either, right? I mean, the U.S., it's the biggest economy in the world.
It is, yeah.
And those decisions they make on trade, tariffs, financial regulations,
Oh, yeah,
that stuff can send shockwaves through global markets,
for sure.
Impacting currency exchange rates, investment flows, even economic growth in countries far beyond U.S. borders.
Oh, absolutely.
It's amazing how interconnected we all are.
It really is, yeah.
But before we get too lost in those global implications, let's come back to the U.S. election for a sec. We mentioned earlier about the possibility of delays in getting the results because of the increase in mail-in ballots,
Right.
especially in states like Pennsylvania and Nevada.
Right.
Can you explain why these delays are such a big concern?
Yeah, of course. Let's take Pennsylvania as an example.
Yeah.
Mail-in ballots, they're great because they make voting more accessible,
Right.
but they also create these logistical challenges. See, in Pennsylvania, unlike some other states, they're not allowed to start processing those mail-in ballots until Election Day itself.
Okay.
So you can imagine, right? Huge piles of envelopes just sitting there, and you can't even open them until the polls close.
Yeah.
That takes time. And when the election is really close,
Oh, I bet.
that time can feel like forever.
It's like waiting for those exam results, but with the fate of the nation hanging in the balance.
Exactly. And maybe even the world, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Must create a lot of anxiety, I imagine.
Oh, tons of it. And all that uncertainty, it can be a breeding ground for misinformation, speculation.
Yeah, I can see that.
With the 24/7 news cycle and social media, rumors can spread like wildfire. And that can really fuel tensions, even undermine trust in the whole democratic process.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's a real concern.
So what can we do as responsible citizens, both in the U.S. and globally, to navigate this period of uncertainty?
Well, I think patience is key, and critical thinking, for sure.
Yeah.
We need to be really discerning about the information we consume. Rely on those credible sources.
Yeah.
Fact check things.
Right.
Don't just believe everything you read, especially those sensationalized headlines. It's easy to get caught up in the frenzy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But it's important to remember that accuracy takes time.
It's like being a detective,
Yeah,
You got to gather the evidence, weigh the facts, not jump to conclusions.
exactly, yeah.
But let's not lose sight of the bigger picture here. We were talking earlier about Kamala Harris running as an incumbent.
Right.
Given that she's the vice president right now, how might that play into the election?
Well, incumbency, it's a tricky thing. It can be an advantage and a disadvantage.
Sure.
On the one hand, you've got name recognition, experience, a track record.
People know who you are.
Right, exactly. But it also comes with baggage.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
All those past decisions, the successes, and the perceived failures.
Right.
How voters view Harris's time as vice president, that's going to depend a lot on how they see the current administration.
Yeah.
And whether they want change or more of the same.
It's complicated.
It is.
Yeah.
So not a guaranteed advantage or disadvantage.
More nuanced.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now let's shift gears for a minute. Let's play out some scenarios. Imagine Harris wins. What could that mean for the U.S. on the global stage?
Okay, yeah, let's do that.
Well, it could signal a kind of return to a more multilateral approach to foreign policy.
Okay.
With more emphasis on diplomacy, alliances, engagement with those international organizations.
So more cooperation.
Yeah, potentially. And we might see a renewed focus on global issues, like climate change, and a real effort to rebuild some of those relationships that have been strained, especially over the past few years.
Right, yeah.
It could be a real shift in direction.
Okay, interesting. And what about the economy? What might a Harris win mean on that front?
Well, economically, I think we could see an administration that really prioritizes things like addressing income inequality, promoting clean energy, strengthening those social safety nets.
Okay.
And these priorities, they could lead to changes in trade relationships, investment flows, even the overall approach to globalization.
So some big potential shifts there, too.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
It sounds like a Harris presidency, could really usher in some pretty big changes.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Both in the U.S. and internationally. But what if things go the other way? What if Trump wins a second term? What kind of signal would that send to the world?
Well, I think a Trump victory, it could mean a continuation of his, America First agenda.
Right.
Big focus on those protectionist trade policies, a more unilateral approach to foreign policy.
Okay.
And, that skeptical stance on things like climate change, those multilateral agreements.
Yeah.
We might see him double down on some of those policies that, really sparked debate.
Right.
And divided opinions during his first term.
So it's like a continuation, but maybe even more so?
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got that experience of a first term now.
Right.
So who knows?
It's fascinating, though, how these two candidates, they represent such different paths for the U.S.
Oh, absolutely.
And as we've been discussing, for the whole world, really.
It's true, yeah. And while we're waiting to see how it all unfolds, I think it's a good time to step back and think about the power of democracy, the importance of getting involved, civic engagement, and how interconnected our world really is.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by it all, for sure.
It is. But if we understand the dynamics, the different scenarios, those global implications, that can actually empower us to engage with these issues in a more informed and meaningful way.
It's a good reminder that elections, they're not just about picking a leader.
No, not at all.
They're about shaping the future for the U.S. and for the world.
Exactly.
And as we wait for those final results, especially with the possibility of delays.
Oh, yeah.
I keep thinking about what you said about patience and critical thinking. Those are so crucial.
Absolutely. We got to be ready for, potentially a longer wait.
Right.
And resist that urge to jump to conclusions or get swept up in all the hype.
Yeah.
Instead, let's focus on staying informed, having those constructive conversations.
Okay.
And remembering that a healthy democracy, it really thrives on that informed debate.
Right.
And a shared commitment to the process.
Well said. It's like we all have a role to play,
We do, yeah.
Not just through our votes, but also how we engage with the issues, our willingness to listen to different perspectives, trying to find common ground even when we disagree.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And as we wrap up this deep dive, let's leave our listeners with one final thought-provoking question.
Oh, okay. I like it.
We've talked about how this election might impact the world, but how might the world impact this election?
Ooh, interesting.
Could events happening globally, could trends, could they influence voters, and maybe even sway the outcome?
Yeah.
It's something to think about as we watch this whole thing play out.
It's a great point. We're all part of this global tapestry, connected in ways we don't always realize.
That's for sure.
And as we move forward, let's embrace that connection.
Yeah.
Engage with curiosity, with open minds.
I like it.
And strive to create a future where everyone has a voice.
That's the goal.
A chance to thrive. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back soon to explore more fascinating topics and uncover those hidden connections that shape our world.
Looking forward to it.